And as a child, we used to go up there, and everything was horse and buggy then. And Grandpapa used to drive his horse and buggy down to Brewster, and I used to get in the wagon with him, and we'd drive around town to get various food to take back. And I never forget when they first came out with cornflakes. I said to Grandpapa, I said, you know what I had for breakfast this morning? No, I had cornflakes. Cornflakes, artificial cornflakes. Yeah. Nothing like having eggs and pancakes and fried potatoes for breakfast. That's what you gotta have.
My earliest memories were of a real Norman Rockwell little town. There was no Blackberry Hill up in Tornado Lake. There was no Brewster Heights. There was no Drewville Heights. There was nothing up on Star Ridge except a couple of houses. The village was the village. The village was who we were. There were very little outside residential areas.
Movie theater is in the same place it is now, up, well, that it was, on the main street. That theater was there for many, many years. I don't remember a theater being any other place. And there was only one screen in movies. It was not multiple screens like there are today. It was just one screen, one picture. There used to be serials. Every Saturday afternoon was the Cowboy serial, so everybody went to, you know, that was a kid's thing. Well, we didn't have a television. My father he wasn't going to buy a television until he could see the whole Brooklyn Dodger team on the field at one time. Well, that never happened. We used to listen to radio, and radio, I think radio did a lot for us that maybe kids miss out on today, and that was to use your imagination. We definitely used to watch serials such as The Shadow, and the soap operas were on even then. But you learned to build in your own mind what they were telling you. They didn't show us everything. You had to imagine for yourself what you thought was going on.
The reason I was a Dodger fan is because when I listened to the radio, they were one of the first to broadcast games. The Dodgers would be working their way north from training camp, and it wasn't live. The guy would be in the studio, and you could hear the telegraph clicking, and they would tell him what happened, and he had to elaborate on it and make it sound exciting.
Cigarettes. Okay. $1.65 a carton. You put 2 dimes in a machine, in the cigarette machine, and a pack came out with 2 cents inside the cellophane. So when you opened it up, you had to get your 2 cents out of the edge. It was in the edge, under the cellophane. They packed 2 cents change. And then it went up to a quarter, and everybody was really upset.
I knew my grandmother, and she had electricity going right by the house, but she didn't want it. She had an outhouse. Her children had put in a hot air furnace in the basement, and she wouldn't use that. She had a kitchen range, and she had a kerosene heater in the sitting room, and she had one of the pitcher pumps in the front yard and one in the kitchen. We'd play outside every chance we got, you know, unless, even in the winter, you'd go ice skating, or if there was a lot of snow. We used to go sleigh riding past my grandmother's house, which would, you know, take you down that hill, past Beechers. And in the summer, we used to play baseball or football or Red Rover. You know how to play Red Rover? One kid would be it, and everybody would get on one side of the field. And whoever was it would yell, Red Rover, I dare you come over. And he would tag as many kids as he could, and they would have to join him. And it was kind of an elimination contest. Kids didn't have many toys in those days, but the Iveses lived on North Main Street, and they had a Monopoly game. So if it rained, everybody went there and played Monopoly.
And the first concrete road in New York State section was from Brewster down to Croton Falls. They made a concrete road. And after they completed that road, a couple of us kids got the great desire that we would roller skate on that road. So we took off of roller skates, but guess what? About halfway, the hardness of the concrete road rolled the skate. The skates were steel, metal, you know, and it just rolled the wheels out. So we had to walk home. We couldn't roller skate. That was the end of the roller skating. And there was always something on that stove in the process of cooking. And one of the things that she did was to take onions and slice them up real thin, and they sat on the back of the stove just about September, October. And every morning, if you thought you had a little cold, every morning you would take a teaspoon of this onion juice, and I can feel it going all the way down. I want to tell you, and it went all the way down. And my father always had a slice of onion for breakfast. And at night, when he came home after he had his supper, he would have an apple. So the neighbors used to say, "Brewer, what do you have that onion for breakfast for? And then you sit here eating an apple." Well, he says, you know, the old story, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, and the onion in the morning will keep people away. So you don't have to worry about catching anything that they had. So then we always had mustard plasters. We put mustard plasters on. And my mother always always had a garden, and we always did a lot of canning. And we had to eat the right foods. And growing up in the Depression, when there was very little work around for people to earn any living, and you had to be glad you got whatever was put before you, you ate. Whether you liked it or not, you learned to like it.
The A&P was down at the end of this row of, right across the street here. At the end of this row was run by Freddie Knapp. And I used to go in there with my mother, and I was this tall, and Freddie Knapp must have been 17 or 18, I guess, and I must have been 10. And it was like you saw it in the movies. My mother and I stood at the counter and told him what we wanted, and he ran all over the store and brought it there and put it on the counter, and then he took a crayon, a black crayon, and a brown paper bag, and he wrote it all down and added it up, just like you see in the movies.
Wow, I had a paper route. Not because that used to start here on Main Street, and it used to wind up out where High Bridge Plaza is. And I think the papers were 18 cents a week. Wow. The Danbury Times was 3 cents a day.
Well, the village was quite a place back then. I mentioned you had a Hope's Drug Store, which was a full drugstore, and it had a soda fountain, an old-time fashioned soda fountain. And you had the pool hall, which is still there. You had Lenny's Restaurant, which is now the Whistle Stop. You had the movie theater. The post office used to be next to the movie theater. This is back in the early 60s. Going the other way, you had 2 or 3 barbershops in town, which I used to go to Louis' barbershop all the time. He was located right next to Hope's, but there's a barbershop in there now, in fact. There was Gooson's Furniture. There was Dwyer's Appliance. I mean, you could actually come to the village and buy a stove or a refrigerator. Most people did. I think my mother and father bought all their furniture and all their appliances here in the village. There was a great meat market. There was 3 clothing stores, very fine clothing stores. A couple banks, Putnam County Savings Bank, the County Trust, 2 or 3 newsstands, travel agency, a couple restaurants, and most of them are gone now. Most of that there's not many. Where the Whistle Stop is and the pool hall, that's about it. But anyway, we'd come over the mountain, come down over the railroad tracks, and go to Hope's Drug Store. They had a soda fountain there. You used to be able to get an egg cream for 50 cents, and go to the movies. And Art Hansen ran the movies. He was also one of the postmasters at the post office. And it was $1 for Saturday matinee. And myself and my friends would go in about 11 o'clock and stay there till 4. You're supposed to get out after the first show, but we always hid and whatever. And, Art Hansen would come and try to find us and shake us down for another $1, which he did a lot. I can remember coming down and waiting in front of the Cameo in 1965 and watching the Beatles movie. It was like the biggest thing that happened to the town, to the village. Help in a Hard Day's Night. The Beatles obviously were big back then. Sonny and Cher I listened to, the Mamas and the Papas. Of course, you had to go get the little 45 and play it on the record player at home, and there was no CDs or tape decks or Walkmans or whatever.
Well, the trains were very important. I mean, every other person worked on the train, it seemed. It was an important place that the trains came into, because here's where the roundhouse was, so here's where they turned them around. So there was a lot of work done on trains here. Even then, there were commuters that were commuting to New York City, nowhere near what there are today, of course, but and there was just the steam engines.
Brewster was a small community. You knew the conductor, because Brewster was primarily a railroad town. The railroad was certainly the biggest employer. My father worked on the railroad. My grandfather worked on the railroad.
My father lived there, as I told you, and he was 16, and he and another gentleman decided that they was going to join the circus. And what they were going to do is, when the circus went by up the hill, they was going to jump on the train and join the circus. So they found out what time the train was going by. So Dad didn't tell anybody. This other fellow didn't either. And they packed up their little bag and they went down by the side of the track and they waited till the train came. Well, the other gentleman jumped on and he made it. My father, he jumped and slipped, dropped his bag with his clothes in, and rolled down over the bank. The New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad ran from New Haven up north of Poughkeepsie, and starting in Dykeman's going north, it was a grade, and they always put a pusher on the back, an engine on the back, to push the trains up the hill. The grade. So somewhere along the line, that the train going up the hill got their signals mixed, and the engine in the back was pushing too hard, and the cars buckled in Towners. And there was a train coming down at the same time that had gasoline on, a carload of ham, a carload of marbles, and it exploded. And they threw these marbles all over. So my grandfather lived in Towners then, and he was deacon of the Towners Baptist Church, and he called my mother and father up, and he says, my mother's name was Addie, and my father's name Bernie, I'm named after him. He said, Addie and Bernie, you're going to have to come up. I don't dare go up to look at our church, because he told me about the accidents, the marbles flying all over. He said, I hope they didn't destroy our beautiful windows that we just put in. So Dad and Dad had a pickup truck, and we got in the truck, and it was used in the feed store and farm machinery business. It was painted red, and it was the beginning of the V-shape in the front, one of the first. So we had a V-shape car, and I always liked that V-shape in the front. And the way we go up to Towners to see what happened, we picked Grandpop up and we went up, and there was 2 or 3 houses in the vicinity of the church, just past the church, that was destroyed, completely destroyed. They had burned up. We went around the church, and there was marbles laying all around the church, but nothing had hit the windows. Borden's Mill Factory, they I think it was 18 something or other that they started in Brewster. With all the farmland here, they brought the farmers brought their milk down, and that was the beginning of condensed milk. Brewster was primarily a condensed milk factory. That during the war, Borden thought it would be nice that they had this condensed milk, that they would make coffee for the soldiers, put the coffee in a can and put some condensed milk in and send it to the soldiers. Well, what they were supposed to do when they put it in hot water, they're supposed to put the cans in hot water, drop them in the can, put two little holes in the top. But they didn't put the holes in the top, they put the cans in the water, and the cans exploded and killed quite a few soldiers. So the government says that's the end of the canned coffee. And all the children in the area at night, during the summer, we would have a little contest. The milk house factory had a big chimney, huge chimney, went many hundreds of feet in the air. And swallows used to come there every night and swarm around and go down in the chimney. And we would bet marbles. We would say, I'd bet there'd be 75 go down tonight, or 85 or 95. And the person that came closest to that would collect the marbles. And one night, I don't know what caused it, but anyway, it caught fire, and we lived on Peaceable Hill. I could see that whole place going up in flame and smoke, and it was so discouraging because we always lived next to that factory.
The thing that I remember about that, I was 3 years old when the fire occurred, and I very distinctly remember being carried in a blanket up East Main Street and taken to a house that is still there. There used to be the long steps that came down, but I was taken up there to the house that was up there, and I can remember feeling the heat and seeing the flame. And it was really very frightening because in those days people didn't tell little kids anything. So no, I didn't really know what was going on. I couldn't quite figure it out, but I do remember that. There weren't many young people around. Any men that were from 18 or so, even younger, 17. I believe they started taking them at 17. Were mostly gone, so during that time it was different. My husband he joined the fire department when he was 16 because it was during the war and there was nobody to fight the fires. So when he was in school, he and a few others, when the fire bell rang, they all left school and ran to the firehouse to go fight the fire because there was nobody else. You know, there weren't young people around to do that. They had permission that they could leave school whenever the fire bell rang, and they'd run from Garden Street down to the firehouse. Oh, there was rationing, yes. I mean, gasoline, butter, sugar. Well, they're the things that I remember that were rationed, and that's what you got. That's the time. I don't know if they had margarine before that, but it's the first time I'd ever heard of margarine. And I can remember it used to come white, and they give you the coloring that you could mix in the coloring yourself so it would look like butter.
Butter was 45 cents, I think, or 35. And then during the Korean War, we used to hide the sugar in the butter because we saved it for our customers, which was against the law, and we all knew that. But but when they got the sugar in, they put some out and they hid some in the back room, and then they'd say they were out of it. But if you were a regular customer, they gave you a 5-pound bag of sugar and some butter.
Of course, during the war was a different situation. You know, during the war, I think I was like 9 years old when World War II broke out. And then it was for like 4 years or so, 4.5 years. And we were on gas rationing just like everybody else, so it was limited, but we also walked a lot.
I remember walking to school in snow that was a foot and a half deep that we walked to school. And I remember the school teacher said, God put it here and God will remove it. And we had boots up to our knees, and the boys always wore knickers in the wintertime with heavy socks and with the heavy boots on so that we could get through the snow.
Used to walk to school every day. I walked to school, walked home for lunch, walked back. We had an hour lunch so kids had time to go home for lunch, and that's what most kids did.
The Garden Street School, I went from kindergarten and graduated from high school, and that was it. That was the only school in town, Garden Street School. In fact, there's a cornerstone for the addition they put in 1938, and my signature is in there. Bob Zecker and I signed the whatever papers there were. We represented the kindergarten class in 1938. And of course, because a girl wouldn't be asked to sign anything.
Went to the Garden Street School.
All the way through?
Yes. Yes, we started out in kindergarten in the downstairs, what is now a cafeteria, and you advanced by floors. The elementary floor was on the middle floor, and then when you went to the high school, you really were a big shot then. There was a Miss McEnroe who ruled by the old way, and I mean older than old way, you know. I mean, she would, if somebody misbehaved, she would throw something at them. She used the ruler and snapped nail. Everybody was scared to death of her. I would say we learned a lot, but scared to death of her. Mrs. Lord, she was Miss Fitzmaurice at the time. We had her in the 7th and 8th grade and had her again in the high school. I think we had her like 5 years altogether.
Yeah, school was a lot different then. I went to Garden Street till 1966. Then I went to JFK for 1 year. My mother was a teacher at JFK. Then I went to the middle school, which was the old high school, which is the middle school now. They had double sessions then. That was very difficult. We had double sessions for 2 years. That's when they were building a new high school. And the first year when I was in 9th grade, we went in the afternoon. We went to school about 12:30. We got home at 6. That was hard because you got home, it was dark and whatever. The next year when I was in 10th grade, they swapped it around. We went in the morning, which also was hard because you had to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning.